Hi, you've reached the Talking Racewalking podcast. It's all about racewalking, of course. It's talking to racewalkers from around the world about racewalking. Join me, Noel Payne, a amateur racewalker in Canada, as I talk to elites, Olympians, record holders, masters walkers, and anybody who's out walking as fast as they can. Hi, so this is a section where I'd actually be talking to someone, a race walker. So this is where you can come in. If you know a race walker, you're a race walker, and you have an amazing story, I want to hear from you. So reach out, let's chat, let's get walking and talking. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 6, I believe, of Talking Racewalking. And this time, we're coming back to Canada, and we're coming back to my age group, the Masters category of walkers. And I've brought on Johanna Flipsen, who is someone the Canadian community knows about, and I want to introduce to a wider audience as well. Welcome, Johanna.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, honored to have you. You're. It's funny. Almost every podcast so far, I've been talking to people that I really connected to as I was just starting. Because I believe we shared a quick drive away from one of my first competitions. So rushing you to the airport, I think, was how I first met you.
Yes, indeed. Yes, that was, I think it was in Quebec, and you were able to allow me to catch my plane.
Yeah, I think was that 2020 now? I can't even remember. 2020, I think
just
that was
before the pandemic.
Yeah, Marcel Jobin, his races in Quebec.
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, no, good. How have you been? And you're just back from, now, is this going to be the last competition of the year for you that you just competed in?
Yeah, I just returned from Juarez, Mexico for the North and Central American Caribbean Masters Championships. And I thought it was going to be the last and maybe take some time off because the last 2 years have been incredibly, well, without any break in training at all. But now I'm contemplating going to Santee on January 21st to compete in a 20K because the pandemic and then a major injury allowed me to not compete in a 20K at all in my age group. And since I'm on the cusp of turning 69, this is my last kick at the can to try to set a Canadian record in this current age group. So I've upped my training and seeing whether I might be able to go to California in January.
Excellent. I guess technically that's in the new year, but I mean that's close enough that it's not far away from now. And I appreciate the fact that you broached the issue of how old you are, because it's always a topic for masters, but it's still, you always hate to sort of say how old we are as we're all getting older. So you're an amazing race walker, masters race walker. And before we go on, the Canadian community who's probably listening already know who you are, but Johanna is a Canadian Masters Athletics Board Director for Alberta. You're the president of the Alberta Racewalk Club. I know you're on a board of directors, I think, for a fitness club out where you are. You've been involved in different sports before you hit racewalking, skating, powerlifting, triathlon, running, and then you hit racewalking.
Yes.
And before we've been chatting about Johanna's story, there you have so many records and titles. I didn't even want to try and tally up things. Can you give our listeners an idea of the number of records or a general ballpark of what you've done in racewalking?
Well, I started race walking in my early 50s after a major injury stopped me from a pretty competitive local road running racing career, and started competing at the 55 to 59 age group. And right now I currently hold 26 Canadian Masters records in distances ranging from 1,500 meters indoors to 20K outdoors. And many of those I've broken within those age groups. I've broken my own record as well. So that's where I currently stand.
That's mildly impressive. Just a little bit. And and of course the titles in there, Canadian championships and everything else. And you've been to the Worlds and World Senior Games as well. So you've represented Canada on the international master stage as well.
I have indeed, yes. I've been to a number of world indoors, masters indoors and outdoor championships, starting in I think 2011 with Sacramento, right through to Poland this year, World Masters indoors, and Tampere, Finland last year at the World Masters outdoors.
So as I started with many walkers that I'm interviewing and profiling them on the podcast, how did you talk about how you went from running because of an injury, you sort of moved to race walking. How did you discover the sport? What drew you to it?
It was actually serendipity. I ended up living in the same small city with a fellow who used to be a pretty active runner, also got an injury and discovered race walking actually through Edmonton and area corporate challenge, which some cities in Canada have. And he introduced me to race walking and suggested I go to enter corporate challenge. And corporate challenge and race walking in Edmonton at that time was spearheaded by Holly Gerke, who was a very good female race walker in her time. Well, I should say in her time. She's still younger than me, but anyway, has moved on from race walking. And if it wasn't for Holly and then corporate challenge, I would not have continued on in race walking, I don't think. And in fact, most of us in Edmonton, especially the masters race walkers, can trace our roots back to the annual corporate challenge race walk event and to Holly Gerke's training. But going back to my coach, the fellow who ended up becoming my coach, Dave Keenan, he encouraged me to continue race walking, and actually I found it a fascinating, interesting, technical, hard to do sport that just enticed me.
I love it. Yeah, no, I have the same experience. So I'm nodding over here. If people, you can't hear me, it's my head nodding because very much the same experience. And I think the story of sort of finding that one person or finding someone to connect with in Canada, I think you're very lucky where you were, because we are very spread out in Canada. We've talked to other people, other Canadian walkers. It's very fortunate to find other race walkers. I mean, I think you're lucky if you have a little pocket there in Alberta. What's the race walking scene there right now? How do you get out to races? How does that work for you?
Well, right now, Alberta Racewalk Club, and recently I became the vice president. I decided after 2 years the club needed another person to lead it. Now we have someone else as president as of our AGM last week.
Oh, there we go.
But we are a small group. We have a good half dozen masters race walkers, some of whom are very competitive, and most of our races here are held in conjunction with other track meets. The meet directors are kind enough to put on 1,500 meter or 3,000 races, both indoors and outdoors. And our provincial championship is a 5,000 meter race on an outdoor track. So, and our indoor championship is 3,000 meters. So we're lucky to have that to fall back on. But if you want to go to do any distance work, and which race walking traditionally is a road event, and I think people forget that it has its origins. Pedestrianism has its origins on the road and for distance events. Then most of us need to travel. We need to travel to other events, and I've been lucky enough to be able to do that, both world championships, regionals, and to some really interesting stuff I've done, like the Portland to Coast Relay, which is a 205-kilometer walking relay race that includes 400 walking teams
That's
that
amazing.
compete from Portland, Oregon to the small town of Seaside. So I've had the opportunity to do some interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think that race you mentioned down the States, I'm sort of penciling it in on my bucket list now. It looks like a lot of fun. There's not many events really where you're usually the lone walker, or you're the oddball out, but to have other walkers in a competition must be just amazing.
Indeed, it's fascinating. It's 24, 25 hours of you don't sleep and you just go, and you're packed into vans, and all your supplies are with you, and it's fascinating. And I was actually recruited by some of the U.S. gals in Finland, and my team of U.S. gals are just a wonderful, wonderful group of race walkers.
Well, yeah, I saw your posts, and I was following you, and I think Carmen Jakinski as well was
Yeah.
down doing it as well from the US. So I loved seeing that. It sounds like an intriguing event, and I'm sort of thinking of somehow trying to get down there one year. So I'm always looking for something interesting to do. Um, the next question I want to move to is, I guess we keep talking about the Masters race walking. What are some of the challenges you've found? I mean, you started in your 50s, moving up into your 60s now. What would you say are one of the biggest challenges you've had as a Masters walker, as compared to those youngsters that we used to be? What do you find has changed for you?
For me, it's the quantum of training that I do that or can't do anymore. A lot of people might be surprised to hear that I usually only train in race walking 3 times a week. Sometimes I push a fourth workout in. The rest of the time I spend weightlifting, which is still a passion of mine, although I don't compete anymore. Um, and I'm lucky enough to have all the equipment I need in my lower level of my house, where I everything I need is there. So the quantum of training is, you have to listen to your body as you get older. Uh, some people maybe less than other people. I just find I need to, because of the previous injury. It doesn't take much to tweak that, and then I could be out for 6 months. So that's the big one, I think.
No, that makes sense.
Listen to your body.
Yes, and runners, and I think race walkers are of a similar breed, where we're often a little bit thick-headed, but I think as a Masters, you have to start really listening, and quality over quantity. I keep hearing. I'm not quite there yet, but it's coming, and I can't quite do what I used to. So
Yeah, that's indeed, quality is the name of the game, and being able to get at least a distance workout, an a medium distance workout at a faster tempo, and then do some interval training. So that's three in 1 week, right? And if I can get another one in there, fine. If not, so be it.
exactly. Now, the other question I have too is, as a Masters race walker, have you noticed differences in terms of your technique? Have you had to adapt? Because as we get older, I mean, we all notice the fact that we're not quite as flexible as we used to. We're not quite as strong. I mean, my God, doing a jumping jack now is you realize how long it's been since you do some things. When you're a kid, you're always moving around and jumping. I found as a master, your work, you're sitting, you're not as active, and your body's changing. Have you noticed how your technique changed since when you started in the 50s till now?
Yes, I had been hoping it wouldn't, but when I check myself in the mirror when I'm race walking, indeed I have. I'm not as flexible, despite the fact that I actually do flexibility exercises each and every day. Being retired, I have more time to devote to that, and I do try to maintain my flexibility. But the mirror doesn't lie, and I'm not as flexible, and I'm working concertedly to change that, but it's tough.
Yeah, there's only so many things you can control, and everything else. But I've seen you walk, Joanna, and you're still looking good. I mean, you're
Oh,
still
thank
setting
you.
records. So
Thank you.
yeah, no, honestly, I think perhaps, I don't know if you hear it enough, but yeah, you really do inspire a lot of us to push, to challenge ourselves. Yeah, I love watching you out there walking, and achieving your records. You've got so many, and I think for some of us, we're still chasing. You go after that dream. So some of us live vicariously through your records, I would imagine. So
Oh, well, thank you for that. But it's not all about the records. I think one of the things that's so attractive about the race walk community, both locally, nationally, and internationally, is that we are a small group, as opposed to if you're a marathoner, for example, or another type of road racer. The community is much bigger, and I appreciate the smaller, more intimate feel of the race walk community. I think we're very supportive of each other. We can communicate well with each other, and that's one of the really special things about race walking. Some people may say it's a bit of a fringe sport, and you know what? Sometimes that's one of the good things about it.
That's okay. I understand completely. I think we start off as oddballs, especially those of us that started with running, where we're a little bit the odd one out, and then race walking is just a little more that way, and it still feels familiar. So I've got two questions left for you before I'll let you go. One, of course, is going to be what you're up to in the future, what your plans are, perhaps after January. You're always competing, but before that, perhaps from the Masters perspective, what do you think about what's going on in the world of race walking, and how do you think it's going to affect the Masters world, like the changes in distances, many of the questions, the Olympics, and even looking at the size of our elite fields. How do you think that's going to affect the future of like Masters race walking?
I think I'm sorry to hear about the loss of the 50K. I think 50K has also always spoken to the roots of race walking. However, the relay format that's being touted for Paris and at World Cup in Turkey in, I think, March or April, whenever that is, or February, I think is exciting and brings some new opportunities for people. I think for Masters athletes, I was never going to do a 50K or even a 35K. So maybe the race format, if we can get the relay format, if we can get that in going somewhere for Masters, it's more realistic for us as we age.
No, I think
So
that's yeah, exactly. No, I think I think especially in Canada and the US, the Masters race walking community is actually oftentimes bigger than the young or the elite group of walkers. So and I don't think it's quite the same perhaps in Europe, but I mean, I'm not there to judge it, but yeah, I think it's a different perspective. I would agree with you. I think I'm not sure I'll ever do a 50K. I've run 50, 80, 100, 250K, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many more of those I'll do. And I'm not sure I would race walk a 50, but it is interesting to see what the perspective of Masters looking on all these changes is. So I appreciate your opinion. I agree with you on much of it.
it's a new opportunity. I mourn the loss of what was, and I welcome new opportunities.
Exactly. And you know what? Nothing is final. There's always change. There's always things coming back, and you never know what the future is going to hold. And speaking of the future, what have you got on? What do you got cooking? What's coming up?
Well, as I said, Santee, California is on the radar. It depends on how my training goes, how quickly I can escalate my mileage. Um, and after that, obviously, Gothenburg, Sweden is on the radar. World Masters Athletics Championships in August. Um, Unfortunately, going there will probably mean if I want to do a 20K there, that I won't be able to do my beloved Portland to Coast relay this year because those dates overlap. And just, you know, keep on keeping on. Looking forward to another year and a couple of months when I turn 70, and it's a whole new ball game.
I I love it. That is the fun thing about the Masters. I think it's the fun and the challenging thing. You want to kind of do what you can in your age group, and then it's another challenge as you move up to the next bracket. So I wish you luck with that, and I'll be watching.
Oh,
Happy
thank you.
walking, Joanna, and I hope everybody who's heard this Googles your name and finds out who you are, because you're very inspiring. So thank you for joining
Oh,
us for the podcast.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. Until we meet again.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Talking Race Walking. We've got our first sponsor on board, so thank you to Reshod Walking Shoes for sponsoring this episode and continuing episodes of Talking Race Walking. Reshod Walking Shoes are designed to keep you moving. Find them at reshod.com. Racewalk shoes designed by Carmen Jakinski from the United States, a race walker and racewalk coach.